What if I told you that some of heavy metal's loudest legends were hiding a deadly weakness? On stage, they looked larger than life, screaming into microphones, smashing guitars, and living like untouchable gods. But behind the chaos, their wild habits came with a price too heavy to escape. Drugs didn't just fuel their music, they stole their health, destroyed their friendships, and, for some, ended their lives far too soon. Here are 10 heavy metal stars who were destroyed by drugs. 10. Ozzy Osbourne. The Prince of Darkness himself became a cautionary tale of rock excess that spanned 4 decades of self-destruction. Ozzy's relationship with substances began in the early Black Sabbath days and spiraled into legendary proportions of consumption. He would drink entire bottles of cognac daily, snort lines of ants for shock value, and perform outrageous stunts like urinating on the Alamo while wearing his wife's dress. His alcohol tolerance became superhuman, consuming amounts that would kill ordinary people while continuing to perform. Multiple near-death experiences punctuated his career, including a terrifying 1,989 incident where he strangled Sharon while blackout drunk, nearly killing her before snapping back to consciousness. His liver was so damaged that doctors said it resembled that of a severe cirrhosis patient, yet he continued drinking. The combination of alcohol, cocaine, and prescription pills turned him into an unpredictable force of chaos, capable of anything from brilliant performances to destructive rampages. Despite multiple expensive stints in rehab throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Ozzy continued his destructive patterns for years. Eventually, family intervention and serious health scares forced him toward sobriety, though the neurological damage was already irreversible, leaving him with permanent tremors and speech difficulties. 9. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx's heroin addiction reached mythical proportions during Mötley Crüe's heyday, culminating in one of rock's most infamous overdose stories that should have been his final chapter. On December 23, 1987, Sixx injected a lethal combination of heroin and cocaine that stopped his heart completely, turning his lips blue and shutting down his entire system. Paramedics declared him legally dead for a full 2 minutes before reviving him with adrenaline shots directly to his heart, literally bringing him back from the other side. Instead of serving as the ultimate wake-up call, Sixx returned home and immediately shot up again, proving the complete control addiction held over his rational mind. His drug use began as a way to escape childhood trauma and poverty, but heroin became his undisputed master, controlling every aspect of his existence. The bassist would spend thousands of dollars daily on drugs, often disappearing for days in crack houses and shooting galleries, living in conditions that defied belief. His addiction destroyed relationships, nearly killed bandmates through secondhand exposure to his lifestyle, and turned recording sessions into drug-fueled disasters where more time was spent getting high than making music. Sixx's candid autobiography, The Heroin Diaries, revealed the full extent of his descent into hell and his eventual path to recovery. 8. Layne Staley. Layne Staley possessed one of metal's most haunting and powerful voices, but heroin addiction transformed him from a charismatic frontman into a reclusive ghost who haunted his own life. His descent began during Alice in Chains' meteoric rise to fame in the early 1990s, initially using drugs to cope with the overwhelming pressures of sudden stardom and deep personal demons that had plagued him since childhood. Heroin became his constant companion and closest relationship, more important than family, friends, or music itself. As his dependency deepened, Staley withdrew from public life almost entirely, rarely leaving his Seattle apartment for the final years of his existence, becoming a prisoner in his own home. Bandmates and friends watched helplessly as he deteriorated physically and mentally, his once robust frame shrinking to skeletal proportions. His teeth fell out from drug use, his weight plummeted to dangerous levels, and his once powerful voice became a shadow of its former glory. Multiple intervention attempts failed as Staley refused all treatment offers, convinced that recovery was impossible. He was found dead in his apartment on April 19, 2002, having been deceased for 2 weeks before discovery. The combination of heroin and cocaine that killed him represented the tragic end of one of grunge's most gifted and tortured vocalists. 7. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's addiction story is intertwined with his legendary rage and perfectionism, creating a volatile combination that nearly destroyed his career multiple times and turned him into metal's most unpredictable figure. After being kicked out of Metallica partially due to his excessive drinking and violent behavior, Mustaine channeled his anger into forming Megadeth while simultaneously diving deeper into substance abuse as a way to numb the rejection. His consumption was absolutely staggering, a full fifth of vodka daily, combined with massive amounts of cocaine, heroin, and prescription painkillers that kept him in a constant state of intoxication. The drugs fueled his existing paranoia and violent tendencies, leading to multiple band breakups as talented musicians couldn't handle his increasingly erratic and threatening behavior. Studio sessions became absolute nightmares of missed deadlines, explosive confrontations, and creative paralysis caused by his impaired state. Mustaine's addiction reached its peak when he began hallucinating that people were trying to kill him, leading to dangerous situations where he would threaten band members and producers. In 2002, a severe nerve injury in his arm threatened to end his guitar playing permanently, serving as a brutal wake-up call about his mortality. Multiple expensive rehab attempts failed before Mustaine finally achieved sobriety through a combination of intensive treatment and finding Christianity, allowing Megadeth to reunite and continue creating music. 6. Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland's battle with addiction became as famous as his distinctive voice, ultimately overshadowing his considerable talents as a vocalist and performer, turning him into a tragic figure of wasted potential. His heroin and cocaine use began during Stone Temple Pilots' commercial peak in the mid-1990s, initially hidden from bandmates and fans who had no idea their charismatic frontman was slowly destroying himself. The addiction quickly consumed his entire existence, leading to increasingly erratic stage performances, missed concerts that disappointed thousands of fans, and multiple arrests that made international headlines. Weiland's drug use was compulsive and self-destructive in the extreme. He would disappear for days without contact, spend entire band advances on drugs before anyone could stop him, and lie constantly about his sobriety status to everyone who cared about him. Multiple expensive stints in luxury rehab facilities provided only temporary relief, as he would relapse often within weeks of treatment completion, sometimes using again before even leaving the facility. His addiction destroyed his marriage to model Janina Castaneda and severely strained his relationships with his children, who watched their father waste away. The formation of supergroup Velvet Revolver offered hope for a fresh start, but Weiland's continued drug use led to his dismissal from that project as well. Despite brief periods of sobriety and creative resurgence, his addiction ultimately proved fatal when he overdosed on cocaine and alcohol in December 2015 while on tour. 5. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo's heroin addiction nearly ended his life during Pantera's commercial peak, transforming the aggressive frontman into a shadow of his former self and threatening to destroy one of metal's most important bands. His drug use began innocently as a way to cope with chronic back pain from years of intense stage performances and the brutal physical demands of fronting such an aggressive band. However, prescription painkillers quickly led to street heroin, which provided more effective relief but came with devastating consequences. The addiction severely affected his legendary vocal performances, causing him to nod off on stage during shows and deliver inconsistent performances that frustrated longtime bandmates and devoted fans. In 1996, during a Dallas concert, Anselmo overdosed on heroin and literally flatlined for 4 terrifying minutes before being revived by paramedics who worked frantically to save his life. The near-death experience should have served as the ultimate wake-up call, but Anselmo continued using despite the obvious dangers. His addiction contributed to increasing tensions within Pantera as bandmates grew tired of dealing with his unreliable behavior, missed rehearsals, and drug-induced mood swings that made working together nearly impossible. The heroin use also fueled his existing paranoia and aggression, leading to conflicts that would eventually contribute to Pantera's bitter breakup. Anselmo eventually overcame his addiction through multiple treatment attempts and sheer personal determination, allowing him to continue his musical career with various successful projects. 4. Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads' tragic death wasn't directly caused by drugs, but he was completely immersed in the chaotic, substance-fueled world of Ozzy's touring organization, where reckless excess was normalized, encouraged, and practically required for survival. The young guitarist, only 25 when he died, was surrounded by constant drug and alcohol abuse that defined the early 1980s metal scene and created an environment where dangerous behavior was not only accepted but celebrated. While Rhoads himself was relatively clean compared to his heavily intoxicated bandmates, the atmosphere of reckless behavior and consistently poor decision-making ultimately contributed to his untimely demise. The tour bus environment was filled with cocaine, alcohol, and increasingly dangerous stunts that pushed all boundaries of safety and sanity in pursuit of the next thrill. Rhoads' death came when the band's bus driver, high on cocaine and lacking sleep, convinced a small aircraft pilot to take him and Rhoads on a joyride that violated every safety protocol. The aircraft clipped the tour bus while attempting a dangerous low pass meant to buzz the sleeping band members, crashing immediately and killing everyone aboard instantly. The tragic incident highlighted how the drug-fueled culture of rock tours created situations where preventable tragedies became almost inevitable. Rhoads' death robbed metal of one of its most promising and innovative talents, serving as a stark reminder of how substance abuse creates devastating collateral damage that extends far beyond just the primary users themselves. 3. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy Kilmister built his entire persona around legendary excess, consuming absolutely staggering amounts of speed, alcohol, and cigarettes daily for over 4 decades until his battered body finally surrendered to the relentless assault. His drug of choice was methamphetamine, which he consumed constantly throughout each day to maintain the superhuman energy levels needed for Motorhead's absolutely relentless touring schedule and the aggressive musical style that demanded everything from him. Lemmy claimed to have taken speed every single day since 1968, along with consuming an entire bottle of Jack Daniels daily and smoking multiple packs of cigarettes, creating a toxic combination that should have killed him decades earlier. His cramped apartment was filled with Nazi memorabilia, vintage slot machines, and various drug paraphernalia, creating a monument to rock and roll excess that became legendary among visitors. Despite repeated warnings from concerned doctors about his rapidly deteriorating health, Lemmy absolutely refused to slow down or moderate his consumption in any way, viewing the substances as essential to his identity and creative process. The deadly combination of powerful stimulants and depressants wreaked complete havoc on his cardiovascular system, leading to multiple serious heart problems and severe diabetes in his later years. His distinctive voice became increasingly gravelly and harsh as decades of abuse took their irreversible toll on his vocal cords. When Lemmy died in December 2015, just days after being diagnosed with aggressive cancer, his body was so thoroughly damaged by decades of relentless substance abuse that the disease had found an easy target. 2. Paul Gray. Paul Gray's death shocked the metal world and highlighted how prescription drug abuse had become as dangerous as traditional street drugs in claiming musicians' lives. The Slipknot bassist struggled with addiction for years, initially using alcohol and marijuana before progressing to harder substances, including heroin and prescription opioids. His addiction was largely hidden from fans and even some bandmates, as Gray maintained a relatively low public profile compared to other Slipknot members. The combination of morphine and fentanyl that killed him represented the new face of the opioid crisis, affecting musicians and society at large. Gray's addiction intensified during periods of stress, including relationship problems and the pressures of maintaining Slipknot's intense performance schedule and creative output. Multiple attempts at rehabilitation provided temporary relief, but Gray struggled with the underlying issues that drove his drug use. His death in May 2010 at age 38 was discovered in an Iowa hotel room, ending the life of a talented musician who had helped define modern extreme metal. The tragedy forced Slipknot into hiatus and highlighted how prescription drug abuse had become a silent epidemic in the music industry. 1. Pete Way. Pete Way's career was defined as much by his legendary excess as his bass playing, with drugs and alcohol repeatedly derailing what should have been a Hall of Fame musical journey. His consumption was extraordinary, even by rock standards. ISA, reportedly drinking 2 bottles of brandy daily while consuming massive quantities of cocaine and heroin. Way's addiction led to him being fired from UFO multiple times, despite being one of the band's founding members and primary songwriters. His unreliable behavior, missed performances, and drug-fueled incidents became infamous throughout the rock world. The bassist would disappear for weeks on drug binges, spending entire record advances on substances and leaving bandmates to cover for his absence. His addiction destroyed multiple marriages and relationships, as family members couldn't compete with his primary relationship with drugs and alcohol. Way's health deteriorated severely over the decades, with multiple overdoses, liver problems, and other substance-related medical issues. Despite brief periods of sobriety and musical comeback attempts, he never fully escaped addiction's grip. His death in August 2020 represented the end of a cautionary tale about how talent and creativity mean nothing when addiction takes control of an artist's life completely. These heavy metal stars seemed unstoppable, yet addiction proved to be the one thing they couldn't outrun. Their rise was legendary, but their fall was heartbreaking. The question is, how many more icons will be lost before the music world learns from their tragedy? If you want more untold stories of the dark side of fame, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next story might shock you even more.